I don't know anyone that is instructing us how to handle the virus, and regardless, everybody doesn't want us to panic. And I think that is something that we never want to do. Panic is not a good way of dealing with anything, and especially a crisis. And one of the things that helps me in not panicking in situations and to remain calm is the Word of God. And I want us to go to a place in the Bible, in Acts the 27th chapter, where it was nothing like being calm when Paul was on his journey to Italy. He was going as a prisoner. Luke is with him. Aristarchus, in Colossians the 4th chapter, he's been arrested. He will be also in prison with him because he's a fellow prisoner with Paul. A lot of people were involved. 276 people were on board. That's counting the crew. And on this particular occasion, I want us to go through very briefly and to look at what took place. One of the interesting things about this chapter is that Luke gives us so many details about a journey. And I want us to understand that we can indeed make plans for a journey and understand that our journeys can be very dangerous. Notice in Acts the 27th chapter and verse 1, and when it was determined that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners to the centurion named Julius of the Augustan band, and embarking on a ship of Adramyttium, which was about to sail unto the places of the coast of Asia, we put out to sea. Luke's there with him. And Aristarchus, there will be the prisoner with him of Macedonia. So they set out. Where do they want to go? They want to go to Italy, but they're going to be on another ship before they ever get there. But they were making their way westward. And I want us to understand that this indeed can be a very dangerous trip. It was determined, and then apparently Paul may be a little seasick, because they have to stop off inside and for him to be refreshed, as we see in these first 9 verses. And they were going with great difficulty, even to be involved in getting there, but they put out to sea in verse 4. And all of a sudden they want to head westward. You got 2 islands, Cyprus and Crete, and the winds are going against them. And in these verses it says they went slowly and with great difficulty, to the point that in verse 9, and when much time was spent and the voyage was now dangerous, because the fast was now already gone, Paul spoke to them. Now, it's not because the fast is gone that all of a sudden everything's dangerous. It's the time of the year. The fast usually took place in what we know as October. Winter is coming on. And because of their making their stops, and because they have been trying to go westward when the winds are against them, now the time had come that it was now dangerous to keep going. So we make plans. We make plans to go on a cruise. We make plans to do this or that, travel to this city, even within Texas or going to other places. Trips can be dangerous. Judgments are needed. Wise judgments are needed. Paul says in Luke says about what Paul does. Paul admonished them, and here's some wise judgments. He said unto him, Sir, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury. Now, he's not speaking of injury here to the people, because that's going to include them, but he's going to talk about the people in just a moment. Be with injury and much loss, and only of the lading, and not only of the lading of the ship, but also of our lives. There's going to be injury to ship. There's going to be injury to the people, but we are going to lose our lives if we go any further. That's Paul's admonition. Do you think that was a wise judgment upon Paul? He hasn't received any information from God, as far as we know. He's speaking. He's been in boats before. He's been on the sea before. It was now looking at circumstances and realizing that It is a dangerous thing we're doing. It's even more dangerous than when we started, but I'm sure thankful that Julius let me stop off and be refreshed. But it's now dangerous. Wise judgments are always needed, not panic, but making wise judgments are needed in difficult times. Decisions can be positive, but they didn't follow Paul. Verse 11, but the centurion gave more heed to the master and to the owner of the ship. It's his boat. Let him make the decision. He said, we're going to Italy. And then to the things that were spoken by Paul. And because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to put to sea. They're making judgments too. I think we can get and winter in Fairhaven. So we'll go under the lee of Crete, and we'll go around on the south side, and we'll be protected from those winds. And we can winter there. And because the haven was not commodious to winter, they more advised to put out to sea. And from thence, if any means, they could reach Phoenix. That's on the western side. And there, which is the haven of Crete, looking northeast and southeast. That means there was a curvature. And when a sailor approached, he could say we could come in from looking northeast, and we can come in, looking southeast. And we could be looking that way, and that would protect us from the northwest and the southwest winds. We need to get to Phoenix. And so they made that decision. Paul said, it's dangerous. We're going to lose lives. And yet, in verse 13, and when the south wind blew softly, supposing that had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete and close to the shore. Things were kind of positive, weren't they? We're going to achieve our purpose. So you had people making different decisions, and I think all of them are pretty wise in their own place. No one's criticizing that. But all of a sudden, we need to understand that circumstances can suddenly change. Verse 14, it says, and after no long time, they're beat down upon a tempestuous wind, which is called the Aquilio, and which the ship was caught, and not enough face the wind, he gave way to it, and they were driven. Now, we call things, well, that's like a northeaster. Well, the wind was blowing from the northeast, but it's not a northeaster. It was driving them further south. It was a tempest, and all of a sudden, things were going to be horrible. And they're going to be involved in seeing this sudden change. They are worried about, in verse 17, they were fearing lest they should be cast upon the citrus. They lowered the gear. What they're fearing is that here were two channels that would meet together off the African coast, and a lot of times there would be sand bars there. There would be boats that would be known to go there and never come out. And what did they do? They fear. And they're fearing to the point they're making what you would be wise decisions. They are lightening the ship. They don't want it to go aground. They are out of control. The wind is blowing them toward Africa. And of course, and so what did they do? Listen to the work they do for 3 days. He said, they lowered the gear and were driven. As we labored exceedingly with the storm. I think Luke's trying to be involved in helping. Everybody, hands on deck. And they threw things overboard. And the third day they cast out with their own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars shone upon us, that's how you tracked where you were as a sailor. That's gone. It's dark. You can't see. We're driven. We know what's ahead of us. And they're doing the best that they can. And he says, all hope that we should be saved was now taken away. Would you disagree with them? No. But all of a sudden, making decisions have been done. It seemed like a decision contrary to Paul was pretty good. Suddenly a change happens. And now they're in the consequences. And all hope is taken away. And what we do when that takes place, that we can realize, does that mean God is no longer in control? Does that mean that God has left us? All hope has been taken away? Well, that's what seems to have occurred, but that's when God comes on the scene sometimes at the right time. And what we begin to see is that Paul made good judgments, but sometimes good judgments are wrong. Why do we say that? Or why do I say that? Verse 23, at this time when all hope is taken away, all of a sudden Paul speaks. For there stood by me this not an angel of the God whose I am, whom also I serve, saying, fear not, Paul. Thou must stand before Caesar, and lo, God hath granted thee and all them that sail with thee. That's why I know back in earlier the chapter, that was a judgment of Paul. It was a wise decision from a man. But he was not right. You're going to get to Italy. Sailors, all hope is gone. Paul, you're going to get to Italy. And that's when God intervenes and he speaks to Paul by an angel. The authoritative God is saying, you're going to be there, and all the people that are with you are going to be there as well. So Paul was making a judgment. But good judgments can be wrong. But I tell you who's always there. It's God. He never left them. You can blind the stars and you can take all navigational helps away. You can do all you can to stop something, and it's going to happen. That doesn't mean God is not there. Read with me when Paul realizes God told me to not fear. Thou must stand before Caesar, and lo, God hath granted thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, Paul says, now be of good cheer, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it hath been spoken unto me. But we must cast upon a certain island. God, why don't you deliver us, and let's get rid of all these problems. Oh, you're going to have some issues yet, but you're going to get there. And everybody's going to be saved. When looking at it, says, no way that's going to happen. Because you're going to have trouble with the ship. And what we see taking place is that as they waited, they began to make preparations as they got closer and closer to land. They made preparations. They had the rudders that had been up, probably two rear rudders that had been put up because the wind wouldn't break them apart. They loosened them because they're going to try to get to the place where they need to be as they get to land. Anchors that they had cast aside were thrown over. That's not going to help them any. The foresail is put up so it could take the wind that's going to direct them, and they're going to try their best. But there were some sailors on board that day that said, we're just going down here to release the anchors, and what they were doing, they were releasing the lifeboat. They're trying to get away. That was their decision. Paul says, you're going to have to stay in the boat to be saved. They were getting ready to kill the prisoners. But like that centurion, there's always a centurion is always praised in the Bible. He's always good. He didn't allow that. I think he's the only one who's really thankful to Paul what happens. But that ship is torn apart. Oh, what are we going to do? Some can't swim. Those that can't swim, there's some broken planks. Have at it. Those that can swim, hit the island. And that's what they did. And nobody lost their life. And I want application. Everybody's got their opinions. Everybody's got their wise decisions. Everybody has their think-sos. Let's rise above that. Decisions can be positive. Circumstances happen. Decisions can be just and wise and how appropriate. And I appreciate the elders here that they have made precautionary things that we can do. We know how the virus is communicated. The numbers that we're supposed to meet together have been 500, 250, 10. They don't know. It could be 3 that can communicate the virus to one another. And we're not arguing. I'm not judging people for the decisions they have to make. They may be wise, but sometimes wise decisions can be wrong. And sometimes we need to rise above the circumstances and realize there's a God. And what can we do? Fear not, Paul. Be of good cheer, people. I believe God. And it was an answer to prayer. Is that something you and I can do? Come back with me to Romans the 15th chapter. In Romans 15 and verse 31, Paul wants the brethren in Rome, because that's where he's going to be. That's his trip. He wants them to pray. In fact, he wants them to strive together with me in prayers to God. And he had threefold purpose for prayer. I will be delivered from the disobedient Jews in Jerusalem. That my ministration for Jerusalem will be accepted. The Jews will accept the money I've been collecting. All the churches from Macedonia, I hope they'll be accepted. And thirdly, that I may come unto you in joy through the will of God, and together with you find rest. You don't think prayer is powerful? And when does God show up? Right at our darkest hour. Don't fear. Make wise decisions. And what we can do is to pray for one another, that our journey will be such that we won't lose life, that we'll realize God is in control. On this occasion, it was God's will for him to go to Italy so he can preach the gospel. Now, God has not intervened with us and said this is going to turn out just fine. We're left to our judgments, left to our decisions, but they can all be faulty and they can be wrong. So let's pray for God's will, that we will remain calm because we have a God that overcomes our fears. We read a passage, and I'll close with this, where the winds were blowing. What were the people fearful of? They've been in boats with wind. Their boat was filling up. Peter, how come you're going to sink when you want to walk on the water? He sees the effects of that wind. It wasn't the wind, it's that the boat's filling up and we're going to perish. Our boat's breaking apart and we're going to perish. Not necessarily. And I want us to realize that we are captivated by the circumstances so often. We are seeing things immediately around us and it seems like this is crazy. There's no hope for us. We're all going to die. And I want us to rise above in these times when we all could die. Rise up and realize there's a God that can control the cause for our fear. And I trust him. And I hope we at this time when we can't be together as we like, that we will use precautionary measures and be wise judgments, whatever you see. But that we will be busy striving, as Paul said, pray with me, strive with prayer for me. That indeed those goals, that we'll be safe and we'll be able to meet together as we would like in the future. Don't panic, be calm, fear not, pray. And I hope that will help us. You may not be a Christian this morning. You may be looking at your life saying, I'm not prepared to meet my God if I were to die. But you came to the right place because all things are ready, that we can assist you in obeying the gospel this very hour. If you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and you believe that he died for your sins, was raised for your justification, and because of his resurrection, he was declared to be the Son of God with all power. You believe that with all your heart. You realize you're a sinner. Put your trust in that death and resurrection as God would have us to do, and be willing to confess, I believe Jesus is the Son of God. And in repentance of your sins, we can baptize you into Christ. If we can help you in any way, please come forward as we stand and sing.